Stephanie, what happened that day that Giovanni was hurt?
So actually, I had received a text message from McKinley asking to have Giovanni overnight free of charge. It wasn't unusual because she would take my kids camping and stuff with her family. So I agreed to it. Around 8:00 p.m., we got a phone call from the hospital stating that our son was dropped off with blunt force trauma.
Okay, well, wait. So, and I've had babysitters stay with me overnight or stay with the children overnight many times when I would have to go out of town, and I did not like having to go away at all, but I trusted them. Question to you. When she asked, could Giovanni stay over, they didn't go camping, or did they?
They ended up not going. He was dropped off before.
So the first you know that anything is wrong is a call from the hospital, not from her?
Yeah, she actually texted me after the hospital called. She didn't call me.
And what did she say in the text?
That we needed to rush to St. Anthony's Hospital because Giovanni went lifeless after a bath.
Okay, right there. Guys, with me is Giovanni, 2-year-old Giovanni's mother. Giovanni horrifically injured after a beating from a nanny who we now believe was drunk. Two special guests joining us in addition to Giovanni's mother, Stephanie, who was speaking out today for all you moms and dads listening. With me, Dr. Jan Gorniak, renowned pathologist, former medical examiner in Clark County. That's Vegas. And you know, Dr. Gorniak never had a lack of business in Vegas. Dr. Gorniak, a child, and I know this is crazy, but very often I would bathe the twins 3 times a day. In the morning when they woke up so they would feel fresh, then like after lunch, and then before they went to bed. But we used it as a time to like read books and play music and all that. But that said, a baby doesn't just go lifeless after a bath. That doesn't happen.
No, it does not. So it's interesting, and Stephanie, my prayers go out to you too, and speedy recovery for Gio. But yes, and it's interesting because I'm not going to say a good number, but quite a few of my child abuse cases that I've worked on, it's in the bathtub. The bathtub comes up, and I believe that the perpetrator puts the kid in the bathtub to try to revive them. So it's not like they went unresponsive when they were in the tub. I believe they were already unresponsive, and they were just trying to want to splash water on them or something. So
that's really interesting.
That's always a red flag for
Dr.
me.
Gorniak. That's really interesting because thinking back, and anybody on the panel, we have a lot of awesome guests today to support Stephanie Reichert. And Stephanie, do you call Giovanni Gio?
Yes, we do.
Now that I'm thinking about what Dr. Gorniak has said, she's right. I'm thinking back on so many abuse cases, and so many of them start or involve the bathtub. And one of the very first cases I can think of along those lines is a name that will forever live in infamy, Louise Woodward, the au pair. Baby Maddie Eapen died after a bath. Take a listen to our cut 9.
Louise Woodward is a British teenager when she joins an au pair agency and begins working for physicians Deborah and Sunil Eapen. She is to take care of 3-year-old Brendan and 8-month-old Matthew. In her 3rd month on the job, she calls 911 claiming Matthew stopped breathing. At the hospital, doctors realize his injuries were so serious, police are called in. Matthew Eapen has a fractured skull, a subdural hematoma, and an ophthalmologist notices retinal hemorrhages suggesting shaken baby syndrome. Woodward is arrested, charged with assault and battery. When Matthew Eapen dies, charges are upgraded to murder. Woodward never talks to police, deferring to the au pair agency supervisor. At trial, the jury finds her guilty of second-degree murder, and she is sentenced to life in prison. However, at a post-conviction relief hearing, Judge Zobel reduces the conviction to involuntary manslaughter, and she is sentenced to time served and released.
Oh, as I recall, his name is Judge Hillard Zobel, and I will never forget it because a jury convicts the au pair, Louise Woodward, of murder too. And everybody got hung up on the shaken baby syndrome. I don't know how they managed to forget about the fractured skull and the subdural hematoma. But that said, at sentencing, the judge says, yeah, I know they convicted her of murder too, but I'm just going to let her walk free on time served. That actually happened. And we're seeing here that baby Gio has a horrible, horrible blow to the head. And Woodward told the jury, she took the stand, that somehow baby Maddie squirted out, jumped out of her arms after the bath and cracked his skull on the tile floor. Back to Gio's mother, Stephanie Reichert. Stephanie, what exactly were Gio's injuries?
He had a subdural hematoma.
Yes.
He had a 9 millimeter midline shift in his brain. He had bruising all over his body, on his neck, his arms. He had the bleeding behind his eyes. You said the name. I don't remember the medical terms. Bleeding behind both of his eyes. He had a huge bite mark on his forearm. He had a slap mark on his thigh, a slap mark on his back, and just bruising all over everywhere.
Stephanie, it's just so much worse than a blow to the head. You know, let me go to Christopher Byers, private investigator, former police chief, Johns Creek, now owner of ByersInvestigative.com. Listen, you and I, we're not MDs like Dr. Gorniak, but I know when a baby or person has bruises on their arms like this, that baby was held by the arms, slap marks on his back and his thigh, a bite mark. Look, Stephanie Reichert isn't making this up. These injuries are in doctors' reports. Doctors that don't care. I don't mean they don't care about the patient. They do care about the patient. But they are writing clinically, analytically. They're not making up a dramatic scenario. Like if I want to know the truth, I look at what the medical examiner writes. Because they don't care. They don't care who you are, where you're from, what color you are. They care about your anatomy and what cold, hard science tells them. Same thing with doctors. I don't know why they're that way. They're very, let me just say, antiseptic when they write out these reports, Chris Byers. So when a doctor who doesn't know Stephanie Reichert, doesn't know Gio, is not a relative or a family friend, they write down there's bruises on the neck and the arms. There's a slap mark on the thigh. There's a slap mark on the back. There's a 9 millimeter shift in his brain. He has a blow to the head. There's blood behind both of his eyes. You better believe it's true, Chris Byers, and this is more than just dropping the baby on the tile floor of the bathroom.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is no question whatsoever that this baby was abused. It is just so sad to hear. Listen, again, my heart and prayers go out to Stephanie and her family and little Gio. But, yeah, there is no doubt this is abuse.
I am looking at a picture of Gio lying in the hospital, and I remember I nearly vomited when I saw the twins in the NICU. I saw them right when I gave birth, and they took them out of me. But when I saw them again, they had tubes, intravenous, you name it, all over them. They were so premature. and I'm looking at baby Gio. He looks like he's got black eyes. He has a bruise under one eye. He has just been through hell. Hell. To Stephanie Reichert, Gio's mom, hours later after that information, you find out your son is fighting for his life with blunt force trauma injuries to his head and his body. And tell me, Stephanie, what happens when you see Gio?
So when we arrived at the hospital, we weren't allowed to see him at first. He was in scans. Actually, the chaplain, they said that they were getting the chaplain for us, so we thought he was dead. After about 20 minutes of waiting in the waiting room, we were allowed to go back and see him, and he was unrecognizable. I'll never forget seeing him. He had 50 doctors standing around him. We couldn't even get close to him. We couldn't touch him. And he wasn't breathing when he was dropped off. So it was just awful. Because we dropped him off at the daycare or her house. And when we dropped him off there, he was fine. And then when we seen him, he just didn't look the same anymore. He was so beat up.
When you say he was so beat up, what did you observe?
His eyes were all, this was before surgery, but his eyes were bruised. He had the tube down his throat. He was on a ventilator. I mean, it's so hard to, remember everything because it was awful. Like, I'll never be able to explain the feelings of seeing him like that.